In the first scene, a futuristic train carrying a team of elite fighters on a mission is seen speeding through the train tracks on the moon at very high speeds. Throughout the journey, the fighters mind their business as they all wait quietly to reach civilization on the moon, with some operating holographic computers and others getting their rest. One of them, our MC, Jack Shadow, hums a tune to cure his boredom, and even when he's asked how he knows the song, he says he's not sure. Anyway, soon enough, they pass the criminal checkpoint on the highway, and almost immediately, the train's operator receives a terror alert message and informs all the fighters to get ready for a fight. As the criminals attack the train, Jack and his colleagues spring into fight mode and subdue as many robotic criminals as possible to keep their train from derailing. Soon, the robots on top of the train start hacking into the train's operational system, and the operator immediately informs Reese of the risk of them derailing. With no time to waste, she dishes out instructions to the others to protect the train at all costs, and both Jack and Duan bust out of the train to keep the robotic fingers off the train's terminal. When he gets on top of the train, Jack uses the engraving technology fitted on his suit to create a plasma gun, which he uses to shoot down many of the robots flying after the train. Unable to provide an accurate number of the enemies out there, the operator lets the fighters know it's a kill or be killed situation. So, Duan, Jorg, and Reese all work together to destroy all robots that damage the train. In time, Reese gets on top of the train and joins Jack to face all the robots surrounding them. By choosing to forget all worries and focus on the fight in front of him, Jack amps up his engraving and soon goes full force on these bozo robots. Before the continuation of the main story, a flashback is shown to explain the string of events that led to the war-filled future between the Earth and the Moon. Around a year before the train track incident, an unfazed Jacob Shadow is seen lying on the grass in his house garden, recalling a traumatic experience he had back when he was younger. Apparently, he used to have a friend named Phil and would often play with the dude in a weird facility they were both in. In his memory, he realizes the last memory he has of Phil is back when the guy sacrificed himself to make sure Jack made it out of the burning facility alive. Eventually, the reminiscing ends, and Jack gets up, remembering they're having meatloaf for dinner, and drives his supercar to the team's meeting place in Los Angeles, all while listening to the news about the moon's capital city, Copernicus, hosting a soccer parade and whatnot. When he finally gets there, his butler, Harry, hurriedly welcomes him home, and Jack gets into the house to meet a very angry Reese, scolding him for being late to their meeting. Jack, who's uninterested in her, throws her a drink, ignores her, and moves on to talk to Jorg, Michaela, and Eric, whom he asks about his progress in a particular game they're playing. In time, he asks Reese why she's there, seeing as it's Labor Day, and Reese throws an even bigger tantrum as she gets worried sick about the ship leaving without them. To help keep her blood pressure normal, Jack and his friends fly to the cruise ship using the family chopper and soon get to join everyone having a good time there. Soon after, the orbital shaft, which the Shadow Corporation is about to launch, gets prepared to be launched, and soon enough, the event begins as soon as the cruise ship is docked to the shaft. At the start of the event, Jack's mother hosts the audience and starts the speech by mentioning all the good things the unified AI system, Sapientia, has done since its creation. On a final note, she slowly eases into the moon exploration project, as well as this being the 40th orbital shaft they'll be creating. Upon introducing the launch, Jack's mother does something dramatic as she tries to introduce her son to the general public, only to figure out that he's no longer in his seat. As it turns out, Jack snuck out to gamble and have fun in the casino with Ozma and Jorg. As they rack up their coins, the duo teases Ozma, whom they believe to be uptight, and even dash him a girl to spend his winnings on. Ozma gets to feel the touch of a woman again, but before Jack's happiness lasts, Reese shows up, seething in rage and anger, and pulls Jack to the side to ask him what his plans are because she just can't understand why he's not taking his life seriously. At first, Jack tries to sidestep the question, but eventually, Reese gets tired of him again, and just leaves after reminding the bozo to give his mother the gift he bought for her. Soon, Jack also leaves for their private apartment on the cruise ship, and runs into his father on the way to the dining room. After the small talk, Jack's father advises him on his life decisions and then warns him to take Reese seriously, as she could be a good wife for him someday. When they get to the dining room, they smell the meatloaf and instantly get hungry to munch on it. Sadly, they find Jack's mother, Mona, drunk and spouting nonsense about Jack leaving the event midway and him being with Reese and whatnot. When she starts insinuating that Jack and Reese slept with each other, Jack's father just pulls her aside and walks her to the bed. Before leaving, however, the man asks Jack if he's that worried about being adopted, seeing as he's usually carefree with his life, but then Jack tells him that he just doesn't think he's cut out for whatever they need him for. Hearing this, Jack's father tells him not to think about what other people say and just trust in them, his parents, to give him the best life possible. Around this time, Mona gets worse, and Jack's father is forced to leave. A few minutes before midnight, Reese finds Jack by the deck of the cruise ship, staring at the gift he bought for his mom's birthday, and asks if he's man enough to give it to her this year, as he replies, yes. Jorg, Eric, and Ozma all show up behind them, gisting about the sheer amount of money Goody Two-Shoes Ozma has lost that night and throughout the year in total. In his defense, Ozma tries to blame Sapientia for his losses, claiming that it'll help humanity, but everyone there knows that it's bullshit. Eventually, when the midnight clock hits, the fleet of cruise ships goes lights out, and all passengers have their sights set on the 40th orbital shaft's launch, as the power supplied from the moon brings the systems to life. Suddenly, a series of bright golden lights shines around the base of the orbital shaft and into the sky, leaving the spectators, including Jack and his buddies, stunned. For a few moments, everything appears to be normal, but just then, the lights suddenly go out all around Earth, and before Jack or anybody could figure out what's happening, Jack gets hacked. Unable to do shit about the hack, Jack finds himself getting pulled into a cosmic holographic space where he finds his long-lost buddy, Phil, inching dangerously close to him. Just as the guy's about to touch him, the whole space turns red, and suddenly, something starts pulling Phil back where he came from. Before disappearing out of sight, Phil urges his buddy, Jack, to lend him his strength, so he can use it to fight for the moon, and then disappears. When Jack finally comes to, he finds himself muttering Phil's name to his buddies, who ask him what the matter is. With no time to waste, Jack ignores his buddies and rushes back up to the deck to stare at the blacked-out orbital shaft. Very soon, some cyan-colored lights flash around the orbital shaft, and Jack, who knows trouble's coming, pulls Reese and his friends, who are so confused, out of harm's way. Seconds after the flashing occurs, a large explosion occurs in the sky, and soon enough, it reaches the orbital shaft and the cruise ships around it. What was supposed to be a peaceful launch night soon turns into a night of chaos and pandemonium as the burning, falling debris from the sky starts destroying ships and knocking people, including Jorg, out. Considering the situation he's in, Jack makes a move to go save anybody he can find, but Ozma, unable to let his friend walk into death, stops him and throws him, Reese, Eric, and Jorg into an escape submarine, which he closes just right before the orbital shaft's head falls into the water, causing the final explosion that destroys the cruise ships. With Jack and some of his buddies getting off the cruise ship safely, Jack stares out the window and watches a huge pile of debris crash into his mother and father's cruise ship, causing them their untimely deaths. Around this time, on the moon, there's a massive protest by the moon's citizens against Earth's interference in their lives. Soon enough, the leader of the rebellious moon group, Bob Skylum, aka the Moon's Devil, appears to everyone, including those on Earth, to send a holographic message to the people of the Earth and Moon, claiming responsibility for the collapse of the 40th orbital shaft, and vowing to never again allow Earthlings to continually colonize and terrorize them. As he's about to end the message, he declares that moment to be the moment of independence on the moon, and then has the entire moon populace chanting the name of his terrorist organization, Moonrise. By the time his message ends, a certain lady is seen chilling and staring at the holographic message, as if waiting for something to happen the next minute. A few hours after the explosion, Jack is rushed to a nearby hospital for immediate medical care. Thankfully, he manages to regain consciousness soon after, but when he wakes up, he instantly leaves his hospital bed and the gift he bought for his mom's birthday and rushes out of his room to search for his friends, right after seeing the extent of the explosion's damage. On his way, he finds a staff member and asks if any other person was brought in besides him, but unfortunately, the staff says he's the only one they've seen so far. Hearing this, Jack strolls the hospital grounds and finds several dozen people wounded and receiving urgent medical care. At this point, he knows his Los Angeles home would be gone for good. On his way home, he recalls what the staff told him about even Sapientia not knowing about the status of his people, but remains hopeful. When he finally gets home, he grabs a drink, and while in an arm sling, tries to contact everybody he's affiliated with, his friends included, but unfortunately, he can't connect to anybody. After a quick recollection of the incident and the last looks on his parents' faces, Jack tries to contact his buddies again, especially Reese and Eric, but still, to no avail. Tired of failing, he accidentally spills his drink and pulls up a holographic screen to listen to the news. There, he re-listens to the message from the Moon Devil from 9 days ago, and figures out just how chaotic the situation is at the moment. Before he gets to listen to the rest of the news, two men in black suits show up with his mother's gift and take him. As it turns out, the Joint Army suspects him of assisting the Moon Devil in his act of terrorism on Los Angeles soil, and also with the orbital shaft attack. Currently, it's said that the dude would be held in the Joint Army HQ in Nevada for further investigation, and then taken to trial once evidence is found. So, without knowing it, Jack gets driven to the facility hidden deep in the desert and thrown in a detention cell so he can wait till the person in charge shows up. Confused over why he's being detained, Jack struggles with his handcuffs and asks them to tell him why he's being treated like a criminal. At this point, the men, who've been holding their anger in, accuse him of being the person suspected to be behind the joint terrorist attack and beat him up. As soon as they leave, Jack tries to remind them that he's the Jacob Shadow they all know and hate, but nobody does anything. Around this time, Reese, posing as the psychological assessment personnel and lawyer for Jack, shows up with her assistant at the facility to do a psychological analysis on her buddy. As she and her colleague walk toward the holding cell, Reese asks the man to buy her as much time as he can so she can get the full gist from Jack, and the man promises to try his best. As soon as she gets into Jack's holding cell, she prohibits him from any physical contact and states the charges put out against him. him, noting that the joint army is currently trying to prove that he's a criminal. Knowing that she's correct, Jack tells that he got hacked by someone and that it isn't his fault, but then Reese tells him that the joint army will pass his judgment based on a comprehensive review of what he and the people around him remember on the fateful night of the attack. When Jack throws another tantrum, Reese breaks yet another bad news to him. It appears that his genetic screening had been falsified way back before he was adopted, making him look even more guilty in the face of the law. At this point, Reese tells him that even though it appears his parents don't know about this, there's a possibility that his genes mutated at some point in his life after his adoption. With this said, Reese reminds him that she's just grasping at straws and doesn't know the full gist yet. Seeing as she can still intervene in the case at this stage, she begs Jack to trust in her and tell her everything she needs to know so she can defend him. Although Jack tells her that he didn't have any part to play in the terrorist attack, he still knows the man who claims to be Bob Skylum, as he was once raised by that before he was adopted. If anything, he tells Reese that he spent his childhood in a weird facility, and although she was a bit shocked to hear this, she still calmly listens to what he has to say. So, Jack's childhood story begins on a random day when he was woken up by Bob Skylum, who happened to be his handler back then. Each time little Jack woke up, Bob would always ask him if he liked the world he was in, and Jack would say yes every single time. So, on this particular morning, Jack was no different as he jerked awake once he noticed he was late and quickly rushed to the assessment room with his buddy, Phil, to conduct their final assignment. After doing his best to speed things up and finish first, Jack still manages to lose to Phil yet again. Realizing this, he throws a tantrum, and then, while running to the cafeteria, asks Phil why he was late to bed the previous night. Unable to tell him anything now, Phil promises to explain everything better by nightfall, and then joins his junior colleagues and plays with them in the cafeteria before eating. Thereafter, Bob Skylum, a man whom they all called father, shows up and motivates them to keep doing their best so they can one day become revolutionaries in the moon's future. Just as he's about to leave, one of them, Sophie, jumps at him and begs him to stay with them for the day. Sadly, Bob can't do that, so he leaves them all with Phil and leaves for a weird room that only Phil notices. Later that day, while Phil and Jack are chilling out with the others on the moon's grounds, Phil suddenly gets curious and asks his buddy, Jack, if he knows how long they're going to keep staying in that facility, and also about the moon revolution stuff Bob keeps talking about. Before Jack can answer, someone calls them both to remind them it's time to return to the facility. With their conversation cut short, the duo gets back to the degassing chamber to get cleaned up before going to bed. An hour after lights out, Jack steals and drinks a carton of milk, but then finds his friend Phil staring at a big black door that only their father could ever use, and joins him. Back then, Jack never questioned or wondered why they were prohibited from using such a door, as he always thought it to be normal, even though they were made to play freely. Anyway, by midnight, Phil and Jack stayed up and listened to the familiar hum that Jack was playing in the beginning on a small radio Phil had. According to the older Jack, who's narrating the story, they were happy and had no worries at all, but in a minute, everything changed for the worse. Still, in the flashback, little Jack reminds Phil about what he wanted to tell him earlier in the morning, but before Phil could say a thing, an explosion happens in the facility, and the boys rush outside to check it out. Oddly enough, Phil finds the big black forbidden door open, and somehow forces Jack, who's a little hesitant, to pass through it. Upon running a few meters through the corridor, they find a room they've never seen before, and inside that room, there's a big red hole that leads directly outside their facility onto the moon grounds. Soon after, they find a gun on the floor and check Sophie, who's buried beneath a body, only for them to realize that she was never human but a robot all along. As reality dawns on them, their supposed father, Bob Skylum, shows up, cuts Jack's right arm for absolutely no reason, and goes mad when Phil tries to figure out his endgame. In time, Bob abandons the kids and heads out of the facility in his crazy moment. Eventually, the boys manage to walk towards the exit of the facility for survival, but while on their way there, Phil assures Jack that he now knows that the world they've been living in so far was all a lie. Before leaving, however, Phil pins Jack against the door, slices off his arm, and has his robot assistant attach it to Jack's severed right hand. After urging his buddy to make sure to survive for him, Phil disappears, and that's the last time Jack ever sees him, as he alone escapes the terrible accident. Upon landing on Earth the next day, Jack is found near the ocean bank by a couple who save and adopt him into their care a few months later. Everything that's happened after that is pretty much self-explanatory, but as the current Jack finishes his story, his Prosecutor Landry, enters the detention cell and has the men in suits haul Jack into his custody for safekeeping till Sapientia decides on his trial. Before he leaves, though, Landry tells him he's authorizing another genetic screening on Jack, seeing as his genetic information has been skillfully tampered with. Scared they might find something they're not supposed to, Jack throws a fit but is soon restrained by the armed men in suits. About a year after his detention, Jack goes on a mission undercover to the moon's most populated city, Copernicus, to investigate the rebel groups stationed there. On their way up to the moon through the orbital shaft, Reese warns him not to do anything that'll raise suspicion, but then Jack jokes around again, making Reese super pissed at the doofus and throwing yet another fit. Eventually, Jack gets serious and promises he'll behave this time around, and the duo gets into an argument over what Reese will do once they order his execution. In time, the other members of the crew advise Inanna to just ignore the bozos and continue her briefing. As the VC-3 Reconnaissance Assault Unit, Inanna informs everyone that their main mission, for the most part, is to infiltrate the terrorist organization, Moonrise, and eliminate Bob Skylum, the leader of the rebellion. So far, Jorg mentions something about Sapientia not reaching some parts of the Undercity, but then Inanna corrects him, telling them that if the AI unification system could find the exact location of the Moonrise Army's hideout, then they won't be needed. For now, though, she and Reese mention that the Joint Army sent a first task force to set up a search base around Copernicus City, and they're to meet with them as soon as they touch down. After mentioning several of their suspected hiding blocks, the task force approached the landing dock on the moon's orbital shaft, clearly unsure of what to find there. While the VC-3 assault unit makes its approach to the moon's orbital shaft, Bob Skylum, who was summoned earlier to the main gate, mobilizes his troops to launch an attack on Copernicus City's nerve center. As soon as he successfully suppresses and infiltrates the complex network keeping the city of Copernicus together, Bob's subordinates do their best to hack into Unit 5 to ensure they secure the space and get whatever they came there for. While they're at it, Bob, the man himself, armed with an artificial E2 material hand, walks into the control room, violating every safety program put in place to keep the control room out of hackers and terrorists, and faces the fatso in charge of keeping the facility running. Upon having his hackers turn off the emergency alarm system for the control room, Bob forces the boss up and accesses the mainframe database of the control room using his artificial arm to see what Copernicus City has been up to. After fiddling with their systems for a few minutes, he is impressed by what he finds there. So far, the man in front of him is competent enough to take the protection of the city very seriously, and Bob makes the man know how amazing his defense systems are. Sadly, the man's an arrogant piece of so he brags about him being handpicked by the AI, Sapientia, to lead the Copernicus's nerve center, as well as having sole control rights over the system. Irritated by the man's yapping, Bob Skylum blows his freaking brains off and continues stealing information on the city. About an hour later, Reese's team finds out about the Moonrise infiltration, and instantly gets worried about their landing strategy. Seeing as the city's orbital shaft has been compromised, and their mission must remain, Reese and Zoan, Inanna's sister, quickly discover a railway system that leads to the Copernicus's Undercity, so they both decide to abandon their main route to take the other one. Just then, Jack screams his lungs out over losing a game, and, despite Eric's warnings about them being discovered over a pirate network, he assures him that everything's fine. Eventually, the Moonchain airspace radar detects them and orders them to identify themselves before they're allowed to land, meaning they just got faced by the dumbest in the group. With no time to point fingers, Reese orders her men to stay sharp and prepare for a confrontation with the Copernicus forces amidst the chaos plaguing them. With that said, she notions to Zoan and urges her to get ready to rumble, and almost immediately, Zoan pilots the ship towards the base, causing the captain and his crew to take them as a threat. Just as the captain's about to dish out instructions to all personnel on the base, Zoan hijacks their signal, blocking communication, and then buys the others enough time to silently infiltrate the orbital shaft's base and knock out as many soldiers as possible. Jack gets dibs on being the first to take down the smallest fries. Once he's done, he gives the others the signal, and, soon enough, Zoan lands their jet on the orbital shaft unnoticed. Elsewhere, Bob and his group of mercenaries are seen chilling after finally infiltrating and harvesting enough energy to activate something they call the L zone from the nerve center. With this much energy, Doctor, aka the most boring lady in the group, notes that they may just be able to turn the tide of war on the moon in their favor. Tired of her rambling, the Wild One, another lady mercenary in the group, yaps about eating out, but soon stops her yap when she receives information from someone about the communications failure at one of their outposts. Although it's back to normal, she still feels they should send drones to check the space out just to be sure they're not being infiltrated, and this leaves Bob at an impasse. Meanwhile, Jack and his VC-3 colleagues visit the nerve center right after landing to check their systems for possible train routes they can take to Copernicus's Undercity. While Zoan works on figuring out the train route, Duan leaves Jack to check something out, and Eric is seen being overly cautious over the insanely silent environment. Mere seconds later, an unmanned enemy attack fleet approaches the base, alerting the VC-3 assault team to leave their ship, and forcing them to retreat and rendezvous at Point Charlie, since Zoan's unable to hack into them. Soon after they land, dozens of attack robots spread out to cover exits and surround the intruders. When Jack finds out from Eric that they've been ordered to abandon ship, he stops and tries to get Eric to follow him so they can get the ship. As he finishes his sentence, the robots attack him, eventually causing Jack and Jorg to act as decoys to the robots so Eric and Duan can figure out an escape route. With Eric and Duan gone, Jack and Jorg focus on keeping the attack robots at bay, clearly not knowing that Bob Skylum and his right-hand man, Harbinger, were just meters away, watching the fight and figuring out who they are. When the duo notices the boys using engraving technology, Bob gets interested in fighting them, so he asks Harbinger for help. Just when Jorg and Jack were about to escape after beating down the robots, a large structure gets hauled their way and lands beside them. Before they can figure out what it is, the structure explodes in their faces, separating them from each other, and soon, Bob Skylum gets beside Jack and challenges him to a duel. Upon realizing the true identity of the facing him, Jack creates some guns with his engraving tech and does his best to land a fatal shot on the most notorious terrorist ever, only for Bob to block all his shots like they're nothing. Still, Jack refuses to give up as he keeps on firing as many shots as he can, all while reloading as skillfully as possible. In time, Reese sees Jack's stress levels and quickly begs Jorg to stop him before he kills himself. Moments before Jorg steps in to save him, Jack finds himself in an arm lock with Bob's prosthetic hand after trying to stab him with his engraved knife. Soon enough, Bob uses the same engraving to not only deactivate Jack's engraving, but also put him in a threatening position that might make him end up dead. Thankfully, just as the criminal's about to blow Jack's head off, just like the nerve center manager, Jorg swoops in and gets Jack out of the way in the nick of time. Realizing they need a distraction, Jorg throws a smoke grenade to mask their movements and then makes a run for their ship with Jack. Upon finding them, Bob has the robots fire shots at the ship to crash it, with one even firing rocket launchers. But fortunately for the boys, they manage to get the ship out of the loading dock in time before they get blown to smithereens. Just when they thought they were out of trouble, Bob hits their ship with a death ray gun blast and has them falling back down at insane speeds. However, before they hit the ground, Jorg pulls the yoke up and levels the ship before eventually crashing it into the mountain nearby. Satisfied with the results of his test, Bob returns to his ship and orders one of his people, Wisby, to help him out with something. Moments after the crash, Jorg and Jack join the others in the secret train that the others were traveling in, and Jack throws a fit over his failure to subdue Bob this time. Understanding his pain, Jorg urges him to calm the hell down, as he was going to die anyway if he didn't come to save him. With that, Jack calms down and travels in silence for the rest of the journey. Eventually, they get to Copernicus's Undercity and disguise themselves as normal civilians to blend in. While riding a cable car to their contact's location, the group gets to talk about the subpar state of the entire place, most especially the insanely high levels of radiation they're seeing, and wonder if it's like that because of the recent orbital shaft collapse. With no response in sight, they all chill out till they get to their destination and alight their ride. While trekking towards a nearby bar, Jack is stopped by a random little girl on the street who tells him he smells just like her big brother, and he just ignores her to join the rest of his colleagues in the bar. There, they all chill out separately like normal people to avoid suspicion. But then Reese leaves the gambling space to complain about Jorg, and the others shouting like fools in the gambling den to Jack, who's just chilling on the balcony. Once they get past the small talk, Reese talks about their contact being late for their meeting, but then Jack says that they're probably taking extra precautions to avoid being caught, which is quite the best thing to do. Reese agrees with him, but then asks him if he's still worried about his fight with Bob the previous day. When Jack says no, Reese calls him out as a liar, but then he tells her that he's being honest. Having seen the man who robbed him of his parents twice face to face, he felt different, and if not for Reese and Jorg, who stopped him, he knows he might have died. Understanding his point, Reese asks if he thinks Phil, his friend, is still alive. While Jack can't say, he still doesn't know if it's Phil he saw the night it all began. As they're about to talk further, a fight breaks out between Zoan and Jorg over him being too generous and whatnot. Eventually, when they break the fight, they attract unwanted attention from the bar's customers. But before anybody calls the cops, a huge man shows up and takes them to the back, where they descend a few levels through an elevator to get to the secret base under the bar. There, Jack gets to see the base commander, Harry Cox, his butler from back in the day, and is reunited with him. Upon welcoming them and telling them about the preventive measures they took to ensure it was them at the bar, Eric decides to call Zoan over, and he gets escorted out of the meeting room. Shortly after, Harry tells the group that he's still officially missing, which is suitable for the mission, but still reveals that the majority of the people who work on this base don't have IDs as well. Again, Jorg asks an out-of-pocket question and Duan lets him know that his dumbness is the reason why Zoan got pissed at him earlier. Just then, there's a massive tremor in the underground base. When Jack realizes that the tremor came from a possible explosion in the bar upstairs, he rushes to the elevator and rides it up, only to get there and find the entire bar in flames, with Eric's burned body peeking out through some debris. In another flashback to the time before the VC-3 fighters left for the moon mission, Reese's group is seen randomly running away from enemy forces, fully equipped with their E2 material suits and weapons, when suddenly, Jack gets hit by an enemy laser and falls to the ground. Soon after the experience, Jack gets a genetic screening to ensure his genetic information is real this time and nothing's falsified. Once he's been cleared as a VC-3 assault fighter, he's escorted by Inanna and 2 prison guards into an elevator, which they all ride down to a certain part of the facility. While on the elevator ride, Jack asks Inanna, who's on a video call with her sister, Zoan, for his current status, and Inanna, after hanging up the call on her angry sister, tells him that his gender and assignment have now been decided. Finally, before they get to the end of the ride, Inanna extends her sympathies for the bozo, leaving him even more confused than he originally was. When they get to the base, Inanna leads him further into the control room filled with screens and informs a huge man, who happens to be standing near Reese, that Jacob Shadow's been detained by them. Hearing this, the man orders his handcuffs to be removed and dismisses the guards. Thereafter, Jack gets to see the looks on on everyone's faces, as they all still think of him as a criminal, even though all charges against him have been dropped as per Sapientia's orders. Eventually, they all get past that, and the huge man tells Jack that although his genetic information was falsified to begin with, the recent genetic screening they did on him has cleared him fit for military operations on the moon, meaning he has type VC3 genetics and has already been assigned on the assault team without his knowledge. As Jack exclaims in shock, another scrawny man tells Jack about the assault team's mission to eliminate Bob Skylum on the moon, and this time, upon recalling the things that happened to his parents back in the incident that Bob Skylum caused, he accepts the mission without a doubt in the world. After getting his approval of the mission, the huge man calls Reese a major and informs everyone, including Jack, that she will be the leader of the reconnaissance team. With all that said, he ends the meeting and dismisses everyone. On their way back to their quarters, Reese apologizes to Jack for taking too long to get him released, and blames it on Prosecutor Landry's interference in her investigation. Jack quickly moves past that, and then asks, after telling her how glad he is to see her doing okay, about her parents. Noticing the sad look on her face, he quickly changes the subject and asks her about her new rank as major. Well, Reese smiles and tells him she was promoted based on the AI, Sapientia's recommendations, and apparently, someone like Inanna, who's also behind them at the time, was also recommended by the AI. Once they get to the end of the corridor, Reese opens the door in front of them and lets Jack see the other members of his team. When the homesick dude recognizes two of them to be Eric and Jorg, he calls their names and hugs them as tightly as he can, as they all reunite under one mission. Upon realizing how excited they all are, Inanna asks Reese if she knows how many crimes they've committed, but Reese just ignores her and keeps looking at the boys. In time, they all get into training, and their handlers have them partake in a computer-simulated battle experience between them and Bob Skylum's forces on the moon. Upon recreating the scene from earlier, before Jack got his genetic screening, it's revealed that the battle is being fought under the moon's gravity, meaning they all need to adapt to fighting at 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. As the simulated battle gets even more intense, more VC3 members get hit by the dangerous laser guns, sustaining more damage. At one point, Jack implements his engrave system, a special program made from solidified digital signals called E2 material that enables the user to endlessly reprogram objects into other materials as long as they're all of the same mass, and creates a plasma handgun, which he shoots at the enemy forces right after explaining that E2 is usually only used during combat or stealth. Unfortunately for him, he's not used to fighting on the moon yet, so he gets hit several times and is eventually sent out of the simulation screaming on top of his lungs. Having realized that he's failed, Jack throws a fit and leaves the simulation room. Moments after doing some athletics exercise, Jorg and Ozma scold Eric and Jack for being twerps and not getting the simulation fighting thingy right on the first try. In their defense, Eric says they still need time, as that stuff is hard enough already. Once they get past that, they all decide to call it a day, but Ozma goes for another run to get his juices pumping. Shortly after he's gone, Jack lies on the grass, closes his eyes, and wakes up minutes later to Zoan standing on top of him and demanding to know all the details about him being behind the orbital shaft collapse. Inanna does her best to get her hacker of a sister off Jack so she can stop harassing, but Zoan's thirst for knowledge turned out to be just too strong. Eventually, another one of their members, a humongous, quiet guy, picks her up like paper and stares deep into her soul. Then, he drops her and lets Inanna explain things to her younger sister. When she hears his information, Zoan shuts the hell up and minds her business. Thereafter, Eric introduces everyone to Jack, Zoan, Inanna's level 4 imprisoned sister, and Dwan, a level 5 death row inmate. Soon after, the team leader, Reese, shows up to call everyone for a brief meeting. Once everyone's gathered, she reminds them of their mission on the moon, and then informs them that during their 1-year training period, they'll share everything, not just training, but meals, beds, and whatnot to improve their teamwork and coordination. Zoan, upon hearing this, tries to protest her decision, but then Reese gets pissed and tells everyone that her decision is final. Right after snapping at Zoan, she asks for any objections, but then gets surprised when everyone agrees to her decision. Before the meeting ends though, Jack and the others make sure to butter her up with compliments, and Reese ends up blushing her heart out. With the plans and stage set, Team VC3 gets right down to training, eating, sleeping, and doing things together for the next year to improve their teamwork. During one of their battle simulations, the team all work hand in hand to not only evade the enemy soldiers, but also counterattack and take them down as well. After training for the day, Jack and Eric get to discuss the reason behind their team setup during their chill time. According to Eric, he feels that Sapientia chose them all to be on the same team, just so they can keep each other in check and don't run away. Right after saying that, he mentions something else about losing everything, but then promises himself and Jack that whatever happens, they still need to protect whatever matters most to them. As Jack repeats the same thing Eric just said, the flashback ends, and we get back to the main story. Back in the present day, a news report reveals that the explosion in the bar the previous night was a result of a suicide bomber, and so far, about 11 civilians were killed, leaving 9 others injured. While Jack stares at the holographic screen in front of him, his memory takes him back to the exact moment he found out Eric Baker, his best buddy in the world, succumbed to the explosion. Seconds later, Zoan shows up and invites Jack to follow them to Eric's funeral, but Jack chooses to just sit there and reflect on life. Satisfied by his response, Zoan and the others head out to a church in the lower-level district of the city to observe Eric's funeral. Before they begin, Reese thanks the head priest of the church for accommodating them on such short notice, but the priest assures her that it's not a problem. As they discuss, a young man wearing a blindfold returns to the church, and the priest recognizes him instantly. After listening to Reese's plight, the man with pink hair, whom a bunch of kids call Phil, wishes her well and prepares to leave the church, promising to be back to see the kids. As soon as the father wishes him well, he turns and leaves. At that same moment, Jack's seen with an empty glass in a bar staring at the game he and Eric used to play back when he was alive. Once he gets his drink poured, the poor guy returns to mourning his dead friend, silently wishing there was something he could have done to protect him. As he stares at the screen, he recalls the same memory about them protecting what matters the most, and just keeps quiet to continue mourning Eric. Back at the cemetery, every other VC3 member observes a minute's silence for Eric's passing. With the funeral procession for Eric Baker done, Reese returns to the Earth Ring station for an emergency meeting with her colleagues and superiors. So far, they've discovered that the man with pink hair, identified as Phil, has been seen often with the rebel army's commanders. Also, following the Copernicus battles, they've spotted him visiting the lower-level city, which is suspicious, to say the least. Even though they have no evidence to support this, the team decides to begin an investigation on the guy to figure out his endgame. A few days later, Harry takes Reese and her team members to their latest E2 reinforced stealth spaceship invention, the Stingray. According to the specifics, it's totally undetectable on radar and can maneuver even the rockiest terrain. Not only that, but the E2 material fused into the body of the aircraft allows it to be engraved into any kind of vehicle, as long as the engine and the vehicle's mass also stay the same. Even though the engine can't be engraved, Harry notes that the sound suppression system should be good enough to keep their approach silent to most enemy detection systems, making it suitable for the VC3 assault team's future missions. Having heard all the good things about this shiny new aircraft, Jorg, who's been curious the entire time, asks Harry what they're using the ship for. In response, Reese takes over and informs her team that the Earth's joint army plans to engage with Copernicus's rebel army in a full-scale attack. Right after explaining why it's taking them all so long to track Bob Skylum's location, Reese talks about the time Bob had to show his face on the front lines the other day he fought Jack and the others. Ever since then, Reese claims to have new intel on a particular individual who's been suspected of traveling with Bob Skylum a lot. She believes that if they can apprehend this individual, then they can easily determine Bob Skylum's location. So, for now, that's their mission. Aside from that, Reese tells her people that the joint army is already mobilizing their troops as they speak, but then again, it might be way harder for them to capture Bob Skylum, judging by how decentralized his organization is, making concealment easier for him. In any case, she tells them that General Pitter is on a warpath, but is still encouraging the two-pronged strategy they're deploying. However, if they fail to capture Bob Skylum on time, then there's no telling how many million souls would be lost to General Pitter's wrath. To prevent such a massive loss of life, Reese urges her team members to stay frosty and wait for HQ to contact them. With all that said, everyone disperses, and Jorg gets to eavesdrop on Inanna and her sister, Zoan, talking about Eric's death. Apparently, Zoan feels he died because of her, but Inanna does her best to help her move past that. Thereafter, the blonde tells Zoan that she can sit this mission out if she doesn't feel up to the task, even playfully threatening to get her back to prison if she tries to defy her orders. By the time Inanna asks Zoan to let her fight with her, Jorg interrupts them to discuss with Zoan, and Inanna gives them their space. Shortly after Inanna's gone, Zoan shares her drink with Georg, and ultimately asks him why he's come to the moon to risk his life for people who don't know him. When Jorg asks for a better explanation, Zoan tells him that she knows he faked his screening results, and that his parents are also safe, so she just can't understand why he would willingly put himself in harm's way, unlike those who have no connection to the real world. Before Jorg gives her his answer, the scene shifts to Harry's in-situ bar and restaurant, where we see Duan eating dinner and Ozma unable to get anything down. Having realized his hesitancy to eat, Duan asks Ozma for his kill count since he came to the moon, and then tells him that they're in war, so he should kill rather than be killed. Hearing this, Ozma muscles up and starts eating. Soon, Inanna joins the guys and gets some dinner from Harry as well. Around this time, Reese finds Jack, her love interest, somewhere dark playing the games he and Eric used to play, and teases him about the irony of the situation. After a light chat about their fallen friend, Reese praises him for finally opening up for the first time after Eric died. Jack tries to shrug it off, but eventually, he opens up and tells Reese that ever since the orbital shaft fell, something changed inside him. Not only that, but now that his best friend's dead, he always gets this feeling that something's about to break. Thankfully though, with Reese by his side, he can feel safer than he normally would. Hearing him say this, Reese gets seriously shy, and Jack quickly kills the moment. In any case, Jack promises Reese that he'll make sure he doesn't lose anybody else, and Reese, touched by his words, gets up, holds his face, and makes a move to kiss him. Sadly, before they get to enjoy the moment, Reese gets a call and returns inside. Moments later, General Pitter mobilizes his battle spaceships from the Earth Ring shaft and sends them toward the moon to begin begin the campaign. Realizing the big war's about to begin, the VC-3 assault team gears up ASAP and pilots the Stingray, their new machine, from the loading dock to join the fleet after getting Harry's blessings. In the meantime, Bob Skylum has one of his commanders, the one they call Doctor, prepare their large prototype for what's to come. Having fused seeds 2 and 3, the Doctor informs Bob that they only need seed 1's input for them to finally finish what they've been building for ages. Hearing this, Bob tells his team to give him a little bit more time, as he's already discovered the identity and location of seed 1. Before he makes any other statements, they get an alert of the enemy fleet approaching Copernicus City, and after yapping a few jargon, prepare themselves for battle. Upon receiving the order to surrender from the enemy, Robert, aka Bob, leaves the rest in their hands and leaves to find Seed 1. Just then, Harbinger asks him why he's so eager to capture this Seed 1 component by himself, and Bob says that even he doesn't know that yet. In any case, he urges them all not to worry, as the Seed 3, with whom they made a contract, will be joining them soon. With all that said, the criminal team disperses, and they all get down to starting their process. In the next scene, while numerous battleships are seen approaching the Copernicus orbital shaft, civilians hold a protest to send those ships back to where they came from. In the meantime, Reese visits the church where they buried Eric earlier and strides silently through the quiet chapel to pray. Minutes into her arrival, Phil, or the man with pink hair, shows up and asks what she's doing there. Although shocked to see him, Reese keeps her composure as he thanks her for helping evacuate the children before his arrival. Around this time, Zoan notices something messy with Reese's comms and tells Jack and Jorg about it. Hearing this, they try to communicate with Reese, but unfortunately, Reese is hellbent on fighting this in front of her. As she gears up, Phil tells her about the curse on the Moonland, and then talks about her suit and gear like they were abominations to everyone's existence. To see for himself if she's truly a threat to his cause, Phil readies his bionic prosthetic arm for a fight and urges her to fight him. With the stage set, Phil uses the engraving tech in his arm to send a strong signal that messes with all the electronics in the area. Before they know it, attack robots show up on the scene and keep Jorg and Jack busy. Once done, Phil knocks Reese out in one attack, and Jack rushes inside, only to find her unconscious. With the battle between both worlds beginning, Duan and Ozma join Georg to take down the enemy, but unfortunately, some of the robots attack and damage the Stingray, forcing Zoan to touch down. Shortly after making sure Reese is okay, Jack faces Phil, who recognizes him, has Zoan activate zero gravity, and then attacks him with all his might. After failing to land a few shots on Phil, Jack recognizes this guy to fight the same way as Bob Skylum. After a brief pause and discussion, Phil gets serious with Jack and shows him what a real engraving looks like. Having dodged all his attacks, Jack rushes toward Phil and finally gets his glasses off. At that moment, the duo lock eyes and stop fighting when they recognize each other from the past. Right after a brief but awkward silence, Phil flexes his prosthetic arm at Jack and expresses how happy he is to finally be reunited with Jack after searching for him for so long. Having recalled the moment Phil cut his right arm in the past, Jack pieces 2 and 2 together and soon figures it all out. Phil is not only Bob Skylum, but is also the mastermind behind the Moonrise terrorist group all along. For a moment, he struggles to understand how that's possible, but then, as soon as Phil causes a reaction on his right hand and morphs his form to resemble that of Bob Skylum's, Jack is convinced that he's right. A few meters away, outside the church, Duan, Ozma, and Jorg all work together to fight and take down as many attack robots as they can while they can. While they're at it, Inanna asks Zoan, who's busy checking out the Stingray's engine status, if things are alright now. Upon confirming that they are, Zoan happily uses the engraving technology on their spaceship to change the vehicle's form into something much smaller and better. Around that time, Jorg and the others got backed up into a corner. As they stand their ground against the bots, Jorg calls Jack and Reese, hoping to get confirmation that they're okay. Having realized that the jamming signal's down, Jorg figures the explanation for Jack's radio silence must be that he's in trouble. With this in mind, he rushes into the church after asking Ozma to cover his ass. Still inside the church, Jack is seen trying to wrap his head around what he just discovered as he asks several questions at once. With so many things to talk about, Phil bends and politely offers that Jack follow him. Sadly, before that happens, Jorg gets inside the church and gets Phil away from Jack. Then, he rushes over to Jack, who's still confused, and, upon confirming Reese's location and health, urges Jack to get his head back in the game so he can grab Reese, and they can all get the hell out of the church before the robots overwhelm them. Around this time, Phil steps out of the hole he was pushed into and faces Jorg. Unable to let Jack escape his grasp this time around, Phil angrily comes at Jorg, who's more than ready to face him, and unleashes his full power. Although it's risky to face Phil alone, Jorg stands his ground and tells Phil to get Reese out of the church and into safety in time. Soon after, Phil, upon dodging Jorg's bullets, grabs him by the face and throws him out of the church. Then he faces Jack and, with a smile on his face, urges him to abandon his companions and follow him as they're meant to be together. With Jack seriously contemplating his life now, Ozma jumps in through the church's roof and fights Phil hand to hand. At this point, Phil loses throws Ozma out of the way, just like he did Jorg. Unfortunately for him, Duan, who's right behind Ozma, shoots him with a laser blast, which ends up knocking him out for a few seconds. With Phil unconscious, the VC3 team gathers inside the church, including Jorg, and, right after Jack apologizes and thanks them for helping him out, they walk out of the church to figure out an escape route. When they get outside, however, they see a seriously angry Phil approaching them with his robot army, warning Jack to never again let Sapientia, the AI, control them ever again. Irritated by Phil's bashful words about the AI system, Jack and his men charge at Phil and his robot army for the attack, and Phil, who's also ready for battle, instructs his Seed 3 robot army never to let Jack and his buddies escape. With the stage set, the battle between the VC3 and the attack bots begins. Over the next few scenes, Jack and his buddies take down as many robots as they can to clear a good enough escape route for them. When they eventually realize that the bots are just too many, Jorg calls the cavalry, Zoan, and almost immediately, the crazy hacker drives a huge truck into the robot army and only stops when she gets closer to her people so they can get in before it's too late. Once they're all safely in the truck, she speeds off toward the exit and, after almost hitting Phil, finally manages to escape with all of them onto the highway. Despite all that, the robots still keep attacking them, and everyone does their best to keep them at bay. Just then, with no apparent reason at all, the robots drop dead, leaving Jorg, Jack, Duan, and Ozma shocked. In any case, Inanna soon shows up in the engraved Stingray vehicle and gives her sister the signal. Upon receiving the signal, Zoan and the boys jump down from the truck and eventually land on the engraved train beneath it. After making a successful landing, they all pass through the tunnels to freedom and leave the truck and robots to crash into another wall. When Phil spots the explosion in the distance, he realizes he's failed to capture Jack again, so he phones it in and gets on with doing other things. In the meantime, the war between Earthlings and the Seed 3 bots begins, and with Bob Skylum's bots on the losing side, Sylphie, the wild lady, advises him to return so they can figure out their next move. Thereafter, another member asks Bob about his little expedition, and Bob tells him that he finally found Seed 1. Hearing this brings hope to his subordinates, as they all realize that the time they've been waiting for is finally coming. With this, Bob, aka Phil, hangs up the phone and walks away as he promises himself to save Jack from Sapientia. Later that night, the Stingray train travels in silence, and Reese wakes up to find her team members depressed and out of touch. As for Jack, he just sits outside on the back balcony of the train, trying to figure out what the hell happened to the Phil, who used to be so kind and gentle. In time, Reese joins him on the balcony, and Jack finds the resolve to take care of things if he discovers that Phil is Bob Skylum. Elsewhere, Bob and the other higher-ups in his organization discuss the possibilities of the 3 seed entities being the key to world peace or chaos. As soon as their meeting's over, we get to see the exact first scene in this series play out again, meaning we are now out of flashbacks, and are back at the beginning, with the VC3 members inside the Stingray train, Jack humming a nice tune, everyone sleeping, Zoan doing her thing with the computers, and Duan asking him about the song, to which Jack answers that it's a song he always played pretty often back when he was a boy. Very soon after, Skylum's robots attack their train, and the VC3 team members all spring into action to defend their ride. Jack quickly gets himself on top of the train and shoots down as many attack bots as he can with his engraved weapon, saving their arses for only a short while. Eventually, the bots overwhelm the train and cause it to derail at a nearby moon junkyard. About a week later, a random girl strolling through the junkyard spots the VC3 members near their train as they try to report back to HQ. Sadly, the signal's too low for them to send a report, and Zoan suggests they all move eastward towards a vantage point to get a better signal. Before they get to do that, though, Duan tells them they might be there for a reason, and very soon after, the girl from earlier calls to them from her hiding spot. Elsewhere, Phil's seen humming the same tune he used to listen to with his buddy Jack when they were younger. When his trusty companion, Whiz B, shows up, he thanks the little bot for helping them subdue the Joint Army's forces, and tells it that he knows that the AI is using Jack as bait to lure him in. Despite knowing all this, however, Phil remains steadfast in his mission to save his friend from Sapientia. Moments later, the VC3 team members give the random girl from earlier some of their food supplies, and the girl, ecstatic by the thought of not starving to death, thanks them for the help and tells Reese, who asks what she's doing there, that she's looking for someone and has been searching through big wrecks like that one for a long time now. Somewhere along the way, though, the girl says she somehow lost her food supply, but then thanks them yet again for the help they rendered to her. Just then, Jack looks at the wreck in front of him and instantly recognizes it from somewhere. Without saying a word, he walks towards the structure, forcing Reese and the girl to follow him, and only stops when he gets to the cafeteria he used to play at in the facility back when he was younger. To confirm his suspicions, he walks a bit further through the forbidden door, ignoring Reese and the girl, till he finally gets to the room where he lost his right arm to the crazy and real Bob Skylum. Eventually, he gets to a certain lab tank where he used to be kept and cleans off the label on the tank to reveal the name written there, Jacob Jefferson Skylum, a name which the frisky random girl knows to belong to the 50-year-old king of the moon. Having realized that this is probably where he was born, Jack remains quiet and continues staring at the pod. Just then, Reese receives a call from Zoan urging her to get back on board so they can fight the bots approaching, and Reese instantly springs to action as she urges Jack and the girl, Mary, to follow her back outside and fight the bots. As they get outside the room, Jack gets super pissed upon seeing the bots one more time and lunges at them with murderous intent. A few minutes later, an explosion occurs outside the wrecked spacecraft, and soon, Jack, Reese, and Mary all fall to their deaths. During their descent, Jack secures Mary, and by coordinating the fall with Reese, lands all three of them on the engraved Stingray vehicle. As soon as the vehicle takes off, the remaining robots follow it, but eventually, the VC-3 strike team manages to escape their grasp. A few thousand meters away, at the Joint Army Goddard base, a supply vehicle carrying escorts from Earth arrives on the base to deliver some beautiful women to the soldiers on the base to enjoy themselves. Once the vehicle stops, one of the women inside the vehicle, who happens to be Windy Sylph, one of Bob's commanders, stays behind and waits for the other escorts to be taken by the other soldiers. As soon as they're all gone, she secretly alights the vehicle, stares at the entire base, insults the joke of a frontline base, and waits for her delivery to arrive. Once the delivery arrives, she makes a few calls to alert the others that she's at the designated point. Thereafter, she happily places her right hand on the floor and tries to steal some experimental creatures hidden beneath the base. Unfortunately for her, she runs into a problem somewhere along the line and causes an explosion that destroys the place. Meanwhile, the VC-3 assault team is seen traveling further away from the wrecked site with their new passenger, Mary, when she suddenly flares up and asks them to explain what the hell just happened. After a brief moment of confusion and staring at one another, Jorg lies, telling her that they're a civilian research team sent from Earth by the M Atlas Corp and that they encountered those monsters during their investigation of the place, hoping with every fiber in his being that she will buy the lie. Upon hearing a few more inputs from the others, Mary finally chooses to believe the bullshit story they're telling her, seeing as they saved her life. To thank them for helping her out, she takes off her mask, introduces herself, and promises to take them to the nearest town so they can chill out and have fun. About an hour later, Mary finds herself standing outside the train while the others chill inside. Soon, Zoan tells her sister to go talk to the lady who calls herself Mary, as she suspects that she might be a spy from the enemy. Although Zoan may be right, Ozma and Jorg all agree to give the girl a chance, as she might just be a normal, random person. In time, Reese, the team leader, decides to observe and chill with the girl for now. Once they get past that discussion, Duan asks Reese to tell everyone where they stand with all that's happened. Reese gets right to it and names all their failures so far, which is a setback, when put politely. In any case, Inanna tells them they're approaching a mining town in the southern part of the Sea of Tranquility, according to Mary, so they should buckle up and get ready. In the meantime, Jack thinks about everything that's happened up until that point. The pod with his name on it, Phil's involvement in the tragedies that befell him while posing as Bob, and then wonders why he would even do such a thing. As he gets deep in his soliloquy, Reese calls him back to reality so he can listen to Inanna's review on what they know about Bob Skylum. Upon doing the needful, Reese advises they report to HQ and await their decision, simply because they lack enough data to make decisions independently. Around that time, Mary and Ozma get to see the mining town on the horizon, and Jack, ever so ready to chill out, promises to see his buddy, Phil, again. Soon, they arrive at the southern mining town, Hypatia, and blend in immediately with the other citizens by wearing mufti. When they get into the market, Jack sneaks behind his colleagues and gets into the market to get some expensive lunar eggs. After buying them, he shows them to Mary, who scolds him for sneaking behind his team's backs to buy something that expensive. In his defense, Jack says he's never tried them before, so the price doesn't matter. Thereafter, he thanks her again for helping them navigate the complicated layout of the town, and Mary, after accepting his gratitude, decides to stick around for a while since she's not in a hurry. Just then, the duo hear a mob rioting at a popular town structure nearby and talking shit about Sapientia and the Obst forces, who they believe to be receiving money and weapons from the Joint Army. As the whole crowd starts chanting Bob Skylum's name, Jack looks around the place and finds a little girl staring innocently at the people in the mob. With the tension getting higher, a drone arrives on the scene, jams the communication signal in the area, and paves the way for Obst's forces, who arrive after to do their thing. As soon as the Obst forces arrive, they open fire on everyone in the mob, including children, and Inanna and Jorg try to get Jack not to intervene since they're undercover. Before Jack leaves, however, he sees the tyranny of the Obst forces as they obliterate everyone, causing a riot and acting like nothing happened. With the threats neutralized, the captain of the attack team spots the little girl Jack saw earlier carrying a jerry can filled with some liquid and approaches her, ignoring his subordinates' warnings about the girl being a suicide bomber. When he finally gets to her, he offers her a chocolate bar just in case she's hungry, but the girl slaps his hand away and runs as quickly as possible into an alleyway. Realizing she might be with the rebels, the captain's guards follow the girl into the alleyway to capture her, but soon get lost and leave when they don't find her. As it turns Turns out, Jack, who was hiding in the alleyway, grabbed the girl into their hideout and only released her once he was sure the soldiers were long gone. Shortly after releasing her, he tries to check on her arm wound, but soon discovers that she had a prosthetic arm, just like Bob Skylam's, which she loved so much. Eventually, he smiles at her and asks if she has a home, making Mary smile at his kind-hearted gesture. When they get back to the Stingray, Reese updates HQ on their status and talks to Zoan, who's busy trying to analyze the data she's got on the Hypatia town's database, but couldn't get anywhere because of a piece of information she was missing. Having realized this, Reese authorizes her to run another scan on the town, and Zoan does the needful. Around this time, a weird creature locked in a pod deep in an underground structure suddenly breaks out of its constraints and walks its way to freedom. In the meantime, Mary asks Jack, as they walk the little girl to her home, if he's good with ditching his buddies just to keep the girl safe. After assuring her that it's all okay, Mary asks Jack if he has a family, and after Jack tells her he's been looking for him for a whole year now, he urges her not to feel so sorry for him at all. Although a little irritated by his answer, Mary ignores him to look at the little girl, who has just stopped in front of a massive hole in the ground. Very soon, they pass through that hole and get to one of the poorest meeting places of the Undercity, where Jack finds lots of weirdos in the dull atmosphere. As he mutters something about flowers, the little girl asks him what a flower is, and Jack, puzzled, tells her a flower is a flower. Soon after, the girl runs to the kitchen, and one of the guys there shows up to recognize and thank the guy who brought their little girl, Rin, home, right after giving them weird looks. With all three people on their seats, Rin soon returns with 2 glasses of water to serve her 2 new friends. Having realized her name to be Rin, Jack gives her all the expensive lunar eggs he bought from the market earlier and urges her to go make an omelet, even though she's not tried them before. Hearing this, Rin promises to try her best and then zooms off into the kitchen to prepare the omelets. While she's gone, Jack asks the man if he's her father, and the man tells him that everyone in the building has lost their families. Thereafter, he asks Jack if he's from Earth, and Jack, puzzled, asks him how he got to know that. In response, the man tells Jack that there aren't so many people on the moon who can afford to buy eggs at all. So, while the Sapientia puppets on Earth claim to have equality amongst humans, the man lets Jack know that all they know on the moon is decay and poverty. Even currently, the man says there are 2 factions of people on the moon, those who support Earth and those who oppose it, and both parties are in a fierce conflict that often leads to death and civil wars. Rin's arm is one of the casualties of the insane fighting that's been ravaging their streets so far. Around this time, Rin, who just finished making the omelet, comes out of the kitchen with a plate and tells the man that she sees the prosthetic arm as a blessing from Bob Skylam, not a curse. Seeing this, Jack smiles, invites Rin to sit with them, and then creates a fork from the engraving tech equipped, before offering it to her to eat with them. In the meantime, Zoan aggressively sifts through the data she collected after the scan on the area, till she finally hits the jackpot. Inside a particular file floating on her screen, she finds something about L-Zone, Abaddon, and even the Seed projects. Seconds later, she finds something moving at high speeds toward Jack and figures out, together with Reese, that Jack's not even around them. At that same moment, a bunch of OB soldiers infiltrate the meeting place and arrest Rin and everyone they find there, including Jack and Mary. As they walk the prisoners out to their vans, Inanna, Georg, and Dwan are seen nearby watching the stupid soldiers do their thing. It doesn't take long for them to identify these independent forces to be from the Obst group, who claim not to have mercy on rebels, and apparently, children. At this point, they spot Jack and Mary, and then realize just how bad things are. To help them out, the trio quickly rushes to report the situation to the joint army around town. After gathering all the prisoners outside, the captain of the Obst group calls out Rin and tries to get her to tell him the name of the person who helped her escape back in the alleyway. Realizing she's keeping her mouth shut, the captain asks around for the person who helped her. Tired of waiting aimlessly for a response, the heartless kicks the girl and, while pointing his pistol at her head, asks her once again to reveal the person who helped her out. By this time, Jack makes a move to reveal himself to the but just as he's about to get there, the creature that escaped from the underground pod earlier attacks a few of the Obst men and sucks their life force dry, killing them instantly. After seeing what the beast could do, the captain leaves Rin and runs away. Just as the beast approaches Rin, Jack gets in the way and lets the jellyfish-like creature attach itself to his hand. The minute it makes contact, Jack sees a few visions, which he finds strange, and soon shakes off the jellyfish creature, watching it run away. Soon after, the captain, unable to let them all go, throws a grenade in their direction. While Jack moves to protect Mary, he spots Rin and Unk dangerously close to the grenade. Sadly, before he can save them, the grenade explodes and kills them instantly. At this point, Reese, who heard the explosion, sticks her head out of the stingray and wonders what just happened. Elsewhere, Phil's seen recalling what happened to him that day in the facility, right after giving Jack his right arm and sending him to Earth. Apparently, little Phil returned to the Forbidden Room and found the real Bob Skylam raving mad. When the real Bob sees him, he asks about Jack, but then little Phil ignores his question and asks him if he's truly human. In response, Bob calls him Seed 2, an artificial species of sapiens created on the ship, and breaks the bad news to him that he's not human. Right after saying that, the real Bob stabs his chest with his hand and rips out his mechanical heart, claiming that he won't allow sapientia to overtake his body. Thereafter, he tells the very confused little Phil that it appears he's not human as well. As it turns out, the Earth administrators feared that the increasing number of AIs exceeding human intelligence was getting out of hand, so they sabotaged and destroyed that facility to kill off all AI beings living there. As Bob's about to say one more thing, he starts losing his mind, and by then Whiz-Bee, Phil's pet robot, swoops in and finishes him off in a very bright light. Around this time, Phil snaps back to reality, but then the next minute, the doctor rushes to inform them that their operative at the Goddard base, Windy, as well as the L-Zone, has been sabotaged. With no time to lose, Phil and his team get in the air to get to the base and save Windy. While mid-air, Doctor suits up and urges Phil to provide her a map to Hypatia so she can check out the disturbance there. While Phil's at it, she asks if he's had fun in a while, and when he says no, she urges him to take Windy out on a date when she gets back so he doesn't continue having nightmares. Hearing this, Phil thinks about going on a date with the rude Windy and quickly decides against it. Upon joking around a little bit more, the doctor gets into the vehicle and jumps off the plane. In the meantime, Mary's seen back on the Western Delambre base in the Sea of Tranquility, checking herself out in the mirror and worried about how she looks. When she eventually gets in the shower, she takes her time to recall Jack's valiance, as well as the horrible things she's said to him before. Realizing her mistake, Mary decides to pay Jack a visit in his room and apologize. Moments later, Jack's seen in his kitchen cooking up some nasi goreng, when suddenly, Mary knocks on his door. Upon opening up, the wild girl sees herself in his room and talks about the aroma of the food he's cooking up. Jack eventually eases up and asks her to wait for him to add some rice to the sauce so the food can be ready in no time. With this, he gets back to cooking and then asks Mary about her family. As Mary's about to give him some details about her two older brothers, Reese rings the doorbell, and Jack, shocked to see her, opens the door for her. As he's about to tell her Mary's in the room with him, Reese goes on a rant to say everything Mary's not supposed to hear, like how she thinks she might be a spy and whatnot. Eventually, she pipes down when she smells the aroma of the nasi goreng and rushes toward his kitchen to check it out. When she finally finds Mary in the room, Reese notices the skimpy clothes she's wearing and freaks the hell out. A few minutes later, the food's ready and served, but the girls aren't eating, and this stresses Jack out. After a deafening silence, Reese accuses Mary of invading Jack's room upon learning that he's an officer, and Mary, in her defense, tells her one more time that she's no spy. Soon after, she reminds Reese of all the things she's helped them with, like navigating them through the confusing moon world and whatnot. At this point, Reese has nothing else to say, so she silently asks Jack why he didn't tell her earlier that Mary was in the room when she was talking about their mission earlier. Just as Jack's about to respond, his doorbell rings, and he opens it to see a depressed Jorg complaining alongside Duan and Ozma over Mary leaving them for another spaceship. Apparently, Jorg has a crush on her and wants to travel with her again, but doesn't know what to do. As the misguided fool hugs Jack, Duan points to Mary, who's heard everything he just said, and the boys instantly turn their backs on Jack. In all the hubbub, Mary asks Reese if she's dating Jack, and Reese, embarrassed, says they're just friends. Having answered her question, Reese turns to Mary and asks her if she's interested in Jack, and to her surprise, Mary says yes, as Jack reminds her of someone she used to know. Reese then asks a few more questions to try to figure out her endgame, but soon after Mary remains silent, she leaves and dismisses everyone. In the next scene, Reese and the rest of the VC3 members attend a virtual meeting with the general and the other members of the military. Upon providing them a full report on their activities, Reese apologetically tells her superiors about the failures they've encountered so far on their mission, and thankfully, the superiors understand her point, but soon conclude that they must have a mole amongst them who's leaking their information to the enemy. Amidst all that, the general calls for Jack, and then asks him if he exchanged words with the contact, aka Phil, during his encounter. When Jack says no, the general asks if there was anything he noticed, and again, Jack says no. However, he does tell them that something doesn't add up, as he needs to understand why Bob Skylum destroyed the orbital shaft in the beginning. After turning a few heads, the lanky middle-aged man sitting near the general deems it unnecessary to think about a terrorist's mindset. So, in light of the recent update, he does advise that the VC3 unit be incorporated into their Eastern forces. To prove his claim, he pulls up a picture of Windy Sylph, a rebel army commander, and explains what happened to the Goddard Eastern base right after her arrival. In any case, since there have been multiple rebel army commanders spotted there, he believes they should join whatever forces they have left and mobilize to check the issue out in the east. Having realized that his staff advisor, aka the lanky old man, is correct, General Pitter authorizes the VC3 to move to the Agram base in the east and then ends the meeting right after telling Jacob Shadow that he's taken note of his assessment on the Bob Skylum matter. As soon as the meeting's over, everyone heaves a sigh of relief and gets back to doing their normal thing. But then General Pitter gets a visit from a very unexpected person, one of the rebel army commanders. About an hour later, Jorg calls Reese somewhere private so they can talk about Jack, and not Mary. Once he's gotten her full attention, he asks if she's noticed him acting a bit weird lately, and Reese, Reese, confused, asks what he means by weird. Well, Jorg reminds her of the incident the previous day, but then Reese assures him yet again that he's probably just stressed, seeing as they've been through a lot on the moon. Around this time, Jorg reminds her about their fight in the church with Phil, and then asks Reese if she knows who Phil is. Although she knows Phil is strange, Reese reassures Georg yet again that Jack is alright and leaves. To explain what happened right after the OBS captain's explosion, a flashback is shown to the moments after the explosion happened, when the joint army showed up to take care of the aftermath. At this point, Jack, oblivious to the thing behind him, blames himself for causing Rin and her unc's death. At first, Mary tries to let him know it's not his fault, but when he talks about eliminating Bob Skylum swiftly, she switches up and tells Jack that Skylum is the only hope for them all. By then, Jack asks her how she thinks they can end the war, and Mary, unsure of what to say, tells him the people of Earth started this in the first place, so they shouldn't act like victims. In any case, the wretched state of the moon isn't anything new, as the Earthlings slaughtered them all like they were nothing, claiming to follow Sapientia's orders. If not for Bob Skylum, who rose to fight the Earthlings, then nobody would have hope on the moon. Realizing she might be right, Jack gasps, and Mary apologizes for speaking out of line. In any case, Jack expresses that he didn't know all that initially, but now that he does, he'll figure something out. Just then, the jellyfish creature touches Jack where he sits, and the flashback ends. By midnight, Mary's seen staring out the window of their base when she suddenly hears and recognizes the song Jack's humming from somewhere. Curious, she approaches Jack, who's also staring out into space, and asks him about the song. In the meantime, Inanna and her sister are seen sifting through the intentional disinformation to figure out Phil's location. Around this time, Jack talks to Mary about this being the first meeting with someone who knows the song he's singing. He tells her it's a very old song, but Mary, after telling Jack that her brother is someone who's been missing for 8 good years, promises to find him one day. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Jack cheers her on, and they chit-chat for a few more minutes before Mary gets up to go to bed. Before leaving, though, Mary thanks him for real this time for saving her from the bomb blast and walks to her quarters with newfound hope that she will find her brother, Phil, one day, as long as he's on the moon. Meanwhile, Phil, upon approaching the Goddard base, changes his face to match Bob Skylum's and watches from up above as the sea of jellyfish creatures eat up the entire base. As the sea of harmful creatures moves westward, Bob and his commanders make sure to follow and track them to the Sea of Crises. When she finally lands in Hypatia, the doctor's shocked to see that the thing they call the L-Zone has disappeared. Around that time, Mary also announces to the rest of the VC3 that she will now be an official member of their team.